Hi, this is Nahid. Welcome to our class on information interviewing. You know, most people think information interviewing is just for people who are changing careers, but actually it's a powerful tool that you can use anytime you're thinking of making a change and you're wondering what it would take. For example, what would it be like to work at a Fortune 500 company if you've only worked at smaller companies before? What would it be like to backpack in Europe? What if you're a founder of a small company and you've gotten your company big enough, maybe 10 people, and you're thinking about hiring someone like a COO above all of your current employees to take the business to a new level, and you're worried about how they would react? This would be a great tool to help you understand how you might be able to go about doing something like that. What would it take to remodel my kitchen, to outsource my executive team, to franchise, to write a book, to work in a different industry, to start a business, to learn a new language? In fact, information interviewing is a powerful tool that you can use anytime you're considering making a change and the road ahead is a little bit foggy and you don't know what you don't know. And because you don't know what you don't know, you're hesitating a little bit because you don't know how to make good decisions. You know deep inside you're going to move forward more confidently if you can see where you're going. The information interviewing process that we use at Aspire is actually quite simple. First, you find 5 people who've done what you're thinking of doing, or something close to it. And I'm going to talk about how to find the 5 people in a couple of minutes. Second, for each of those 5 people, you're going to get them to tell you their story of how they went about doing what you're thinking of doing. Now, there's an important distinction here that makes all the difference in the world about how much information you're really going to get out of the interview. Most people make the mistake of treating the person they're interviewing as if they were a consultant and asking them for advice. And you would think that's the thing to do. But actually, it doesn't give you very much information because the person wants to be a good advisor. And so a lot of times they'll give you more generic information and they won't give you as much personal detail. But if you approach them instead like a journalist, you're going to hear a lot more personal information, and it opens up a lot of possibilities that you may not have thought of before. And I will give you an example. I used to be a product manager in a technology company, and I also used to be a coach, and I worked with a lot of people who were trying to transition careers. And the frustration that these people would have is that every time they wanted to transition careers, they would get feedback that they would have to go back to school. And they would already be at manager, director level, making almost $100,000 in their current jobs. And so to go back to a $35,000 a year job, or even a $40,000 a year job, entry level, they just couldn't do it. They had houses and mortgages. So then they would end up staying in a job that was absolutely miserable for them because in their mind there was no way they could change industries. Well, in fact, it's not true. Many people successfully change industries. If someone wanted to change jobs or industries into product management and came to me when I was a product manager and said, Nahid, what would it take for me to become a product manager? That is asking me advice. And so wanting to give good advice and be a good consultant, what I would probably say is, well, you should probably have an engineering degree, and you should probably have some marketing experience, and you should probably have some entrepreneurial experience. If they go away from that conversation, what are they going to think? They're going to think, oh my gosh, I have to go back to school. However, if they come to me thinking of changing careers and they say, Nahid, how did you become a product manager? I would tell them a very different story, because now they're asking me not for consulting advice. They're asking me for my story, which I assume is different from everybody else's story. What I would tell them is that I started in the engineering department in a technical role, in a marketing role, a research role, and after about 2 years of interacting with the salespeople, helping them talk to their clients about the products, I ended up getting recruited into the marketing department, and I asked them to consider me for a product manager role, and because of my track record, they agreed, and they gave me a chance. That has nothing to do with going back to school, and that story in itself, and of course, if you were in the conversation with me and I had an hour to share with you, it would be filled with color-filled details about how all that happened. That story in itself is very inspirational, and now I leave the conversation going, there are other ways. Maybe I can get into a company that has the job that I want, and I can develop a good track record and change departments within the company, something like that. Now keep in mind, because you're asking for personal stories, not one person's story is going to be a prescription for how you will do what it is that you're thinking of doing, or how you should do what it is you're thinking of doing. But what you have instead are 5 great examples of people who have done it. And in those examples, if you've been a good journalist and gotten their stories, you're going to have all sorts of details, and that fog's going to clear right up, because you're going to see a lot of pitfalls you didn't see before, and you're going to see a lot of different pathways and approaches. And you can choose what resonates with you. And what most people find is that after just a few conversations, they really have the confidence to move forward with planning and action. And it's also possible that if you get stuck again further on down the road, you can start the process again with a different set of questions or experiences. It's a really powerful process. A lot of people will ask how to find people. Well, of course, you're going to ask everyone you know if they have any friends who fit your criteria and if they can hook you up so that you can talk. If you're upfront with your agenda, they're likely to connect you. And so this is important, because a lot of people think, well, no one will want to talk with me. Well, there's 2 reasons why people would be a little bit shy about connecting you to their friends. One would be if they're afraid that you're going to ask their friends for some kind of an awkward favor or put them in an awkward position. For example, if it was a job that you're looking for information on, they might be afraid that you will give your resume to the friend and try to convince them to pass your resume along or recommend you. And, they can't, in all fairness, recommend a stranger. So there may be things that you are fantasizing about, like especially if you're in job transition. Like a lot of people will say, gosh, I want to do this information interview, but hopefully they'll like me so much that they'll give me a job. And that's actually the wrong approach. You want to be very clear that you're just getting information. And then if you keep them in your network, then maybe a few months later you can come back when you're very clear about what you want and ask up front for a job lead or a job interview. So that's the one thing you don't want to make sure. You want to make sure that you're not putting people in an awkward position. You're very clear up front that you're not going to put your friends' friends in that position, which will make your friends more likely to connect you to their friends. The other thing is time. I'm going to be less likely to connect you to one of my contacts in my network if I'm worried that you might take a lot of their time, especially if I know they're very busy. But if you can guarantee me that you're not going to take more than 20 minutes, I'm much more likely to do that. There's a way of questioning that is really powerful in terms of helping people remember, immediately helping them, remember the names of people in their network who may fit your criteria. And it's pretty simple. It's do you know anyone who? So do you know anyone who's ever backpacked in Europe? Can be more complicated. Do you know anyone who founded a company, grew it to about 10 people, and then hired somebody else to grow it the rest of the way? Now the answer to that question is going to be yes or no. If it's no, then you can follow up with, do you know anyone who might know someone? So I might not know very many people who founded companies, but I might know a few people who founded companies, and maybe they will know someone who founded a company and then hired that COO in. So I might not have backpacked in Europe, but I might have some friends who are in travel groups and they like to travel a lot, and I never thought to ask them if they ever did a backpacking trip, but maybe they have. This is a powerful set of questions. In fact, I would imagine imagine that if I say right now, do you know anyone who's ever backpacked in Europe? If you do happen to know someone who's backpacked in Europe, those names will jump right into your head. Now, the second part of that is whether or not you'll connect me to them. And generally, if you still have their contact information and your relationship with the people, are okay, then as long as you're feeling okay that I'm not going to ask them any awkward favors and I'm not going to take too much of their time, there's going to be no problem making that connection. Every once in a while you're going to get blocked, but you just have to expect that. Remember, you only need 5. Now, just like a Google search, you could broaden or narrow your criteria depending on what you're getting back from your questions. So if you've just got nobody on the founder of a company that hired a COO, then maybe you can say, do you know anybody that has founded a company and thought about doing it, or founded a company at all? Or do you know anybody who's taken a company to the next level? Maybe they weren't the founder. So you can broaden the search criteria that way. Or you can narrow the search criteria to something more specific if you're getting a lot of different people. Now, if you do get the interview, what do you ask? I usually recommend that you choose no more than 5 questions. And the reason for that is, again, you want them talking. You want people to tell you, get relaxed and just start talking up a storm and tell you their whole story. That's where you're going to get all the details that really make it valuable, that really make the information that you're getting from this type of a process more valuable than something that you could get if you just did internet research. And if you're just looking for facts, you get internet research. If you're looking for a sense of how people have experienced this before, you want to hear their whole story. So you want to get them talking. And again, you want to make sure the questions are about them. If you put them in the position where they're giving you advice, that stilts the conversation. Here are some example questions. What made you decide to do it? This is a great question. You should choose questions that actually reflect kind of what you're struggling with. So I remember when I was thinking of leaving corporate America to start a business, I was really scared. So one of my questions was, how did you deal with the fear? Or how did you get up the courage to break away? And that was a great question for me, hearing how other people, how scared they were and how they dealt with their fear. And that helped give me the confidence to move forward, just kind of knowing I wasn't alone and feeling afraid and that other people had done it. What made you decide to do it is a great question to ask if you haven't really made a decision yet, and then you can hear what other people's thinking process was and how they made their decision. How did you go about doing it? That just tells you step by step, how someone did it and how they accomplished it successfully. What were the surprises? What were the lessons? What would you do differently if you could do it again? These are all the things that reveal the pitfalls. What did you enjoy most about the change now that you've done it? This is a great question if you're wondering if all the effort is worth it. So just getting a sense of how they feel now that they're at the other end of the tunnel and they've completed the change really helps you get a sense for how you might feel. Now, of course, you're not going to feel exactly how they feel, but again, it gives you a data point. Another one that I really like is, what is a typical day like, especially if it's a job, but even if it's backpacking in Europe. What's a typical day like backpacking in Europe? How many miles do you hike? When do you camp out? What do you use to camp out with? Those kinds of things. What's a typical day in the life of a person trying to live in a house that's being remodeled? What's a typical day in the life like when you are trying to move into the background and allow somebody else to take over your baby that you've worked so hard to build for the last 10 years? Okay, a couple other things that you should be prepared for. You want to talk by phone with an email introduction. Now, I recommend this because it's quick. People tend to assume that an information interview has to be an in-person conversation, maybe over lunch. That includes travel time. Usually it takes a big 2-hour chunk out of someone's day. Most people are not willing to take a big 2-hour chunk out of their day to talk to a stranger. But if you talk by phone with an email introduction, and in your email introduction you can share the questions you're going to ask, it becomes a much smaller chunk of time and a much more intriguing proposition. Plan on a 20-minute time frame because most people don't see a 20-minute chunk of time is a huge chunk out of their day, and again, they're more willing to do it. The other thing you want to do is when you're in the conversation, you always want to do a time check. So even if they're talking up a storm, you want to stop at 20 minutes and just check in with them and say, hey, I just want to check in with you. I promised that I would only take 20 minutes of your time. We're at the 20-minute mark. I am so enjoying listening to your story, and I have more time for you, and I can listen more if you have a few more minutes. But it's completely up to you how much time you have, and if you need to hang up, I can hang up, and maybe I can call back at some other time, et cetera. And that puts it in their court. But what that shows is that you respected their time, and that makes it much more likely for them to want to continue to stay in touch with you, and also to refer you to more people, because they're going to assume that if their experience with you is positive, then anyone they refer you to will also have a positive experience with you. You want to always ask if you can keep in touch, because you're going to want this person in your network in most cases. And also, you're going to want to ask if they know anyone else you can or should talk to, especially if you don't have people in your network, enough people to talk to yet. So, for example, let's say you found 2 people to information interview with. The people you're interviewing with are your best source for more people to interview with. For example, if you're talking to someone in the healthcare industry, chances are they are going to know more people in the healthcare industry. If you're talking to someone who's backpacked in Europe, they're likely to know other people who have backpacked in Europe. If you're talking to someone who is a founder of a company, they are likely to know other founders of companies. Make sure to follow up and thank them. A thank you card is a great sort of first follow-up contact, and then a great maybe second follow-up contact would be maybe 3 months later to flag yourself and check in with them and let them know how your progress has been, and thank them again for taking the time with you. And then maybe another thing you could do is link in with them. And then maybe just like anyone with your network, keeping in touch a couple times a year is always a great way to maintain that relationship. Now, information interviewing is scary, and a lot of people come to me with obstacles. So here are some of the most popular obstacles that I hear from my clients, and some things that you can try if you're facing the same ones. I don't know anyone. That's an assumption. What you can do to help you get around that is just find 10 people, friends, family, anybody, and ask them the do you know anyone who questions. This is a game I play in networking seminars that I teach, and we always try to think of the most bizarre criteria where we think nobody would know anybody like this. And every single time, even if there's only 5 or 10 people in the room, we always find at least one person who knows someone who might know someone. I just go around the room. It works every single time. So it can really help you build confidence that you'll be able to find the people that you need. Nobody will want to talk to me. I don't know if you've ever been information interviewed, but it is rare that you get an opportunity to actually talk about yourself and share a story that happened to you in your life and have it actually be valuable to someone. We're taught not to talk too much about ourselves, not to make it all about us, to make it about other people. So it's really fun when you can actually sit and talk about yourself and tell your stories and really know that you're not overdoing it and, kind of overstepping your bounds. And then as an added bonus, you're actually helping somebody. The one thing to keep in mind is people will talk to you if you're upfront with your agenda. If you let them know that it's only going to be 20 minutes and that you're going to honor that time, and then you even email them your 5 questions in advance so they know what you're going to be asking, they'll start thinking of ideas and they'll get excited about what they're going to share with you in advance, and they'll definitely want to talk with you. I mean, if you've never given an information interview, you should agree the next time someone asks you. It's really fun. I've done quite a few. I'm embarrassed that I want to do this. It's interesting. A lot of times we feel like if we want to do something big, people think that we're crazy, and that can be embarrassing. I know that when I wanted to start my own company, I was a little bit embarrassed, and I thought, my gosh, if I tell everyone I want to start my own company and then I fail, that idea was really mortifying, and I didn't want anyone to know that I wanted to do it until I was a success at it. So other people may be feeling that way. The way I got around it is I just said, well, I'm considering doing this. I'm looking into it. I'm trying to figure out how realistic it is. And, you know, people aren't really that concerned with you and your successes and failures, so that's enough of a reason. It should make you feel pretty comfortable asking for their stories, and that way you can feel a little bit less vulnerable and more free to have these conversations. I don't have a network kind of goes along with I don't know anybody. Your family and neighbors are connected to more people than you'll ever know. I remember I was talking to someone on the phone who wanted to go into healthcare, and she said, I don't know anybody, though. I can't do this information interviewing thing. And I said, well, what about your family? She said, well, I have a sister that works at a hospital, but she doesn't know anybody. And I thought to myself, your sister works at a hospital and you're looking to talk to people in healthcare. How could it be possible that your sister doesn't know anybody who knows somebody in healthcare? But I almost couldn't say it because she was so convinced and so convicted about the idea that she didn't know anybody. That conviction that you don't know anybody and that you can't do it, that comes from fear. And so I suggest that you just maybe try a few people and see. This will take too much time. That's also an assumption. You can get 5 information interviews done in about a couple of days if you put your mind to it. It really doesn't take that much time, especially if they're all on the phone. And there's so many mistakes you'll make from not knowing. And a lot of times when you don't know, we tend to procrastinate because we really don't know what to do. You waste so much time procrastinating. So I really don't think that the time that you invest in information interviewing will, be a burden. It actually will accelerate your process. It'll be a great investment. That's my opinion. Of course, you have to experience it yourself. The power of connecting with other people can do so much for you. You can learn from the experience of others. You can stretch your mind with new perspectives. It's amazing how much more quickly we achieve our goals and how much more successful we are when we have discussions with other people with different perspectives and experiences. That's why our Aspire program is a group program. It doesn't mean that you're doing all your work in the group. In fact, most of the people in the group program are working with me individually, but they're having conversations with the group, and so that they're kind of getting a win-win. They're getting that personal guidance from me, but they're also learning from the experiences of others, stretching their mind with new perspectives. They're getting access to people and experiences that they would otherwise be oblivious to. They're getting new ideas, making better decisions, but most of all, you achieve your goals faster when you use your connections. Now, I know that information interviewing is kind of scary, and a lot of people feel blocked and stuck when they think about doing it, or they just dismiss it to themselves. But I invite you to give it a try, and if you have any questions or you're worried about it at all, feel free to reach out to me. This is the Aspire website. I've circled the Contact tab. All you have to do is push that button, and you'll get through to a contact form and fill it out, and that forms an email that will come directly to me. And I would love to hear from you. I'd be happy to answer any of your questions. And, if you actually do try this, I would love to hear your story. I'd love to hear it, especially if you had never thought about using information interviewing to do something, then you actually did listen to this video or watch it, and you tried information interviewing and you got great information, and then you got great results afterwards. I would love to hear that as well. So please keep in touch, and I wish you the best of luck with what you're considering, and I want to thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video today. Bye-bye.